Today's daf is daf lamed ches. So we've learned that there's a machlekes between Risham and Beis Hillel. By korban chatzos, you have to spray in all four corners on the kronos, and the korban Risham b'di'evid, if you did two corners, it's sufficient. According to Beis Hillel, you did even one corner, just like any other carbon, which Risham agrees with, it is the same. And we explained the machlekes between Risham and Beis Hillel. But bottom line is, we started saying it says the positive with dams b'checha yishafich and singular. So it means what? That even just one corner, you are chai. You're yaitze. V'dams b'checha yishafich. And then we explained the argument. Another way of explaining the argument Bisham Beis Hillel was according to Bisham might be going up to the Messiris, and it says karnas, karnas, karnas. So therefore, that's each karnas is plural. We read the plural, so that's six karnas, and then one of them is like repetitive because only four karnas in the mizbeach. So therefore, whenever the Torah repeats something, it is ma'akiv. And Beis Hillel says you go after the Messiris the way it's written. So therefore, you only have four, and you need at least one b'di'evet to have a kapara. Or we came up with a new idea that they're both correct, Mercedes and Yoshein Mikra, and then we sort of go right in between. So you add one for the Mikra part, you take off one because of Mercedes, and then you meet in between. So four, so there's six, but four Mercedes, so you go in between. It's just five. That means one of them is the repetitive. That's why it's ma'akiv. So now we're up to the Gemara here in Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. Another way of understanding how Beis Hillel says, or why Beis Hillel says one b'di'evet is good enough. Says the Gemara 5 lines from the top. Another Tana learns it from here. It says 3 times the word v'chiper by korban chatzos. 3 times it'll be an atonement. Why does it say 3 times the word v'chiper? So we are learning now. How do you know, according to Beis Hillel, b'di'evet, if you only did one keren by korban chatzos is good enough? So we're just starting right now. So it says 3 times the word v'chiper by korban chatzos. So what does it tell you 3 times v'chiper? Each one comes to diminish. Lichatchila, you need 4. But each time v'chiper, you reduce it by 1. And why do we need b'chlal to have these 3 psukim to reduce it? The Gemara explains. V'chiper, about 6 lines from the top of the page. It said v'chiper mipnei hadin, because of the logic. I would have thought as follows: logically, nemru damim lemata v'nemru damim lemayla. By kabbanas, some kabbanas you spray the blood below the line, some above the line. Remember, korban chatzos is above, a korban below. And it says, dam, and they both require dam. Keep it. Everyone agrees when it comes to all other kabbanas, if you only did one spraying is good enough. So shouldn't the same law apply to korban chatzos, which you go above the line? Same as be'ech. So might have come in above the line, below the line. If there, but the evid one is good enough, so too l'mayla. That's one way of looking at it. But maybe there's another way of looking at it. What's the other way of looking at it? Nemru damim b'fnim. You find by a korban chatzos that you bring inside the base of Mikdash, it says that you have to spray with blood. But nemru damim b'chutz. But what do we know about the chatzos pnim? That you have to spray in all 4 corners, and b'di'evid as well, you have to spray in all 4 corners. There's no such thing as having any b'di'evid being more lenient. If you don't do it all, it's no good. So we got to now. What do we do? The korban chatzos on the outside. Do we compare it to a chatzos from the inside? So therefore, if you didn't spray all 4 koronas, you don't have a kapara. Or do we say, forget what's going on inside? Let's look at the outside mizbeach. All the other kabbanas on the outside mizbeach, but the evid one is enough. So chatzos is the same thing. So needle me doimer. So which is more comparable to? Do we say don in chutz mechutz? Look at all the kabbanas on the outside mizbeach. We ain't done the chutz mefnim. Don't look at the inside mizbeach. I klach let do. There's no. It goes the other way. Don in chatzos rabakron mechatzos rabakronis. Learn chatzos from chatzos. Val yichia chutz, and don't introduce other kabbanas which are on the outside. Shein chatzos. And they're on the chatas, and they don't have arbakronis. All other kabbanas, even you have shtei matonish and arba, you spray just 2 places, and then it spreads out. Saviv, it becomes 4. Here you have to have 4 zrikas. That's why Tamalayim said the chippah says 3 times the chippah to tell you that, because you might think you should learn it from the chatas panim, that you need mamash all 4, even the evet. So first chippah tells you, even if you only did 3, is good enough. Then another v'chippah says afa pi shalanosal l'shtayim, and the third v'chippah is abish nosal achas. That's how we know. 3 times the chipper. What do you mean? But you need you need to try to tell you that there's a kapara. There's no 3. If anything, there's 2. One of them means for kapara. Amar Rabbi Modi Asberli, that Modi explained to me, Omakra, in that very pasuk it says that you should be chiper olav hakoy mechatoshe v'nislach loy. Isn't that redundant? Kapara zuvi slicha. What's the difference? So therefore, it's going to tell you that the slicha is for the chipper, and the v'chipper is extra. Tell you 3 times the chipper to reduce it from 4 walls to be 4 karanas to be the average one. But there's another way of learning. You come with a big chiddush that even though the Torah insists that you have to spray 4 times, you only spray once, good enough. I can say that the Torah is coming up with a lesser chiddush. What is the lesser chiddush? The carbon chatzos has to be above the line. If you did a couple of the sprayings below the line, it's good enough. And why is it 3 times the chipper? The following. Well, let's say like this. You still need 4. The Torah tells you 4 kranas. Why come up the chiddush that you don't need 4? Say like this: even though I told you 4 lemaila, you did 3 lemaila, but the achas lemata, you still sprayed 4 times, but you did 1 below. Okay. Then the next chipper is afa pishlei nasan el shtayin lemata v'shtayin lemaila, 2 above and 2 below. And the third one is v'chipper apish nasan lemaila el lemata, you did all 4 below. Why does the Gemara jump from 2 above, 2 below to 4 below? Why don't you just say 3 above and 1 below? The Tosfos explains, because the way when you do below the line, you actually spray. Each spray is 2, right? Because it's saviv, so you spray it on the corner and then it spreads to 2. So when you have an odd number, you're not doing it correctly. It's 2 problems there. First, you're doing a lamata, and second of all, you did a matana achas. But the lamata has to be saviv. It has to be one that comes 2. So if you did, let's say 3 above and 1 below, the 1 below is a problem. But because the majority was done correctly, lamaila, only one, so but you did 1 lamaila and 3 lamata. So you have 2 chesronos here. First of all, the majority are lamata. We're supposed to be lamaila. Number 2 is the single one. Okay, we did 1 correctly, 2, and the other one, the single one, you did incorrectly as far as lamata is concerned. So right now the Gemara thinks can't be what the pasuk is talking about. So it must be did all the matzah correctly, and the only chsaron is l'mayla l'mata, and therefore the Torah said b'diavad is good. But to come along with the chiddush and say that if you don't do it at all, it's good enough. How do you know to go that far? I don't know about Yitzchak Yim Kain, because if you're going to say that what that all up below is good enough, but the Torah says I want you to spray on the 4 kronos, and you come along and say you don't need it at all. At least the way we learned before, you Torah says spray 4 times, we say b'diavad if you did once, it's good enough. But at least you did once, something. Here you're doing nothing. What the Torah said. Who cares? If the Torah itself is telling you that the what, I don't care if you did all the kippers to tell you if you did it below the line, good enough. Maybe the Torah meant kronos only limitzah so that everybody can see high up limitzah. But the Torah tells you good enough. What do you have to be firmer than the Torah? What's your problem? Rava says, Ezehu dover shetzarich sholish, having since 3 times the word of kippur. I would say elu kronos. If it says 3 times the word v'chipper, then it makes more sense to say that we're talking about where the kronos are, and there are 4 kronos, and you're allowing 3 to be dismissed. Yeah. So why don't you say, like we just asked before, why Gemara Chatchil didn't say it? So Gemara says, okay, you want to know how you get 3? Because your problem is we jumped to 4. Because the Torah says 3 times kippur, and what did you say? 2 above, 2 below, and the next one was maybe the third kippur is none above and 4 below, but it's 3 kippurs, and you jump to 4. That doesn't make sense. Where do you have 3 by 4 kronos? You drop 3. So you must say, okay, we don't like this svara, but maybe the Torah is telling you that achas lemaila and 3 lamata, even though there are 2 chesronos here, right? Because you have the majority below the line, and one of them is done not correctly as far as below the line is concerned, because you're supposed to do the saviv, you're supposed to do in the corner and spread the 2. But maybe that's what it is. Better saying that than to say that you don't spray any, don't spray 3 times, even though Torah says spray 4 times is good enough. Maybe that's what it is. Said the Gemara. You know why we don't say that? Because where do you find either lamaila or lamata? Here, that's what? That should be half above and half below. We don't find that thing. That your whole svara doesn't make sense to say the part above, part below. There's no precedence for part. So your whole kasha from the beginning is not really a question. So no, we did learn, but now we learned. We learned he's a mehen achas lamaila. when you spray on the kapara inside the base of Mikdash. It says you spray, and we say by in Aveda, you spray one above and Shevel Amata. Right here, you see? You split. The way you understood right now is that you take the pareiches and you sort of split it in half above and half below. So the Gemara, no, kimatzliv. What do you mean kimatzliv? When you give someone petch, right? Your hand moves all the time. So therefore, we don't care if it's above the top half, the bottom half. Your hand has to move kimatzliv all the time. That's all. What do you mean kimatzliv? What do you mean ach l'mayla or shav l'mata then? When you're l'mayla, your hand goes down. When you're l'mata, your hand sprays up. That's all we care about. Which direction your hand is. So one, your hand is spraying down, one, something hand, but we don't care if it all ends up l'mayla, ends up l'mata. And here you're coming along and telling me it's a halacha that you need some above the line, some below the line. There's no precedent for that. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? It says he's al tarei shemizbeach. If the inside mizbeach, you sprayed on the tarei. Tarei l'chayda means like noon because it's called tarei yema, which means noon. What do you mean? You sprayed it on the tar, some above the line, some below the line on the in the mizbeach. Shavapamim, my lava pal mizbeach in the middle of the mizbeach. Says the Gemara, like people say, kamisha toyer tarei yema. When you say noon, you say tarei just like the clearest part of the day. So when it says of day that you should spray on Tira and Tira Mizbeach, it means the part above and part below. That's not what it means. You know what it means when it says on the Tira Mizbeach? Doesn't mean that you get the midpoint of Mizbeach and like noon and you go above and below. No. Aguluya, the part that is uncovered. What do you mean uncovered? The top of the Mizbeach. It says it says it like the middle of the day when it's crystal clear. And therefore, what do we mean? We mean the roof of the mizbech. What do you mean? Why is that called clearing? Because there's ashes on it, and then when you take the ashes off, it becomes revealed. The entire top of the mizbech. That's where I want you to spray the blood. Nothing to do with the middle of the mizbech and above the line, below the line, which is because it's impossible to be mitzamtzim, so some of it goes above, some below. So therefore, obviously, that's what's going to happen. No, talking about the roof. It goes on the roof of the mizbech, on the gag of the mizbech. Says the Gemara, okay, well, let me ask you a question. You spray the blood on the kronos, and what do you do with the leftover blood in the cups? You pour it down the yisoid. So on the same mizbeach, you have some above the line, some below the line. Because the yisoid, the base, is on the bottom of the mizbeach. Says the Gemara, what do you tell me there's no precedent? But because our question was, Haino v'chipa means that if you did only once, it's good enough. We asked, maybe it means you still have to spray 4 times, but just some above the line, some below the line. If you came along to me and said, unprecedented, they can have above and below. Right here, you spray the kronos from the top, and you put the yisoid, the balance of the yisoid. So my answer, if there's no shirayim, it's not a problem. If you don't pour it down, it's not a problem. We're talking about those vital avodas, which are ma'akiv. What's it in then? When it comes to in the mizbeach, over there the shiraim is ma'akiv, and you spray some on top of the mizbeach, and some you spray on the base. So you see clearly there's a precedent for top and bottom. The mandom ma'akiv is one mandom that says it's ma'akiv. When it answers b'chad mokem, don't tell me the inner. We're talking about the outer mizbeach. Show me a precedent on the outer mizbeach with some above and below, and there's no precedent. Yeah, but when you do this, the spraying the blood, the lechayda, you see there's a lamayla lamata, you spray the kronos and then the yisoid. Said, yeah, what does that have to do with the outside mizbech? Beishamai, who says that in order to be the eved, you need a minimum of 2 spraying by chatas, comes out an interesting kula. The all the kabbanis is one, is an interesting kula. Matirois umefaglois. That the two, by according to Beishamai, when is a chatas finally considered you did what you're supposed to do? But the evidence, at least you have to spray 2. If you only sprayed 1, there's no kapara. You have to spray 2. Number 1. But there's a kul also. You know what the kul is? That if you are mefagel, the din is you can't have a chatzi matir to mefagel. We said before that if you spray the blood 4 corners, you have to have mefagel all 4 corners. So since the evidence according to Beisil, 1 is enough. So but the evidence, so therefore when you're mefagel, it's only if you did it by the first one. If you did it by the marshal, the second one, you're not mefagel. But if you did it by the first one, even though there's only 1 spray, it's mefagel. According to Beishamai, if you had in mind when you did the first spray to be mefagel, you'll have in mind the wrong date or something. It doesn't become pigel because you still have to do a minimum of 2, and this is only a chatzi mefagel. So it comes out according to Beishamai is actually a kula. by saying that insisting you need a minimum of 2 sprays. All the same. Even 1 spray is mafagel. Masker Beishim came, at least they got a good Beisham Beis is a whole mission of Masechta Idiots where it lists all of those cases where Beishama is lenient. Why don't we include this in the lenient cases? Rava says, because Ki Ichel Latei Ichel. We wouldn't. That's an outcome, but that wasn't the focus of our discussion. The focus of our discussion was that according to Beishama, you're not yoytze your korban chatas unless you did a minimum of 2 sprays, and Beisil says you yoytze even 1. So who's mekel? Beisil is mekel. As a result of that, you have a cooler. That's not what we're including on Mishnah. Amr Be'Yechina says. So now let's understand. Since according to Beisil, the first spray is he ready to fulfill your mitzvah chatas, and then you have 3 more. There are differences in halacha, but the 3 more and the first one. Like we just said regarding pigul. Pigul is only with the first spray. There's no pigul in the second and third and fourth spray. So said Rabbi Yechina says, Sholosh matana shebechatois. These 3 extra additional sprays they do by chatas, ain't on boys belayla. On the one hand, we treat them still like sprays. So you now do them at night because all the zik have to be done by day. And boys lachamisa, but if the guy dies, we have a din. If a guy dies, set aside a chatas, and he dies, it's called a chatas shemesa bala. The owner died, and you have to the animal die. You let the animal die. But over here, if you already sprayed the first one, and now you have these 3, and the owner died, you still continue with the carbon because you already did. But the whole carbon chatas ready with the first spray. You already did your matter, and but on the other hand, if you take these 3 sprays and you spray it outside the base of Mikdash, even though b'di'evet you don't need it, but since l'chatchila you have to spray them, it's as if you did it outside the base of Mikdash and you chayiv. You did an aveda. You chayiv. Says the Gemara. Papa goes further. Papa says, "Yesh mehen kitchilos." There are certain dinim regarding these 3 sprays that are like the first spray. But yesh mehen kitchilos for certain that what it's like no longer part of the carbon. And the Gemara explains as follows: chutz, taking it outside, it's like the original. The lilac 99 will do that. The zoros Yisrael does it is chayv misa. And the clay shutters, you have to put that blood in the clay shutters. And the keren, you have to spray it on the keren. All the dinim are just like the first one, the chatchila. The etzba, you have to use a finger. Kibus, if it lands on your clothing before you finish the 4, let's say you did the first 2, and then the third one lands in your clothing, you have to wash it. Just tell me. This shirayim, the leftover of the second, third, and fourth cup, you also pour down the yisoid. Kitchilasan, no difference between them and the first spray. But misa, if the owner dies before the first spray, there's no carbon chatas. But if he dies after the first spray, you continue the chatat because you already fulfilled it. Loi shadia, the last 3 are not matter the meat. The meat is mutter ready from the first spray. And mefagla. So by the same token, if you had in mind pigul by the second, third, and fourth, nothing happens. So the Gemara, nor if you brought the second, third, and fourth inside the base of English, you're not going to be. It doesn't ruin the blood. If you brought the first spray inside, said you should bring it inside, then it's a problem. But the second, third, fourth, since they're not really vital to the carbon, it's not a problem. I mean, how do I know this? Now we learned. It says in the Mishnah, "Nitas min atzavar." If it goes directly from the neck, al habeged on the beged, you have to wash. You know why? Because it says the pasuk ashiyazeh. The blood is at a stage that you still need to spray it on the mizbeach, and it lands on your clothes. You have to wash. The kohen has to wash his clothes. But once you finish the spraying that you have to, then it doesn't matter anymore. So, for example, the blood that has to go to the side, and that lands on the clothes of the kohen is not a problem. Why is it not a problem? Because you don't need it anymore. But it's no longer shiyaz. The kibbutz is if you have no blood to pour down the side, it's still good enough. It's no longer ashayaza that you will spray. What about blood minakeren? You spray it on the blood and then it ricochets and it lands on you. You already did what it had to do. It's no longer shayaza. This blood won't be sprayed again. Umina yisayid, or blood from your side, no problem. Anytime kibbutz. Vice is abrahamin haroy lekeren. Any of the blood that you still need to spray. In other words, it didn't ricochet off the keren. You need still to spray like a second, third, and fourth spraying. Don't keep it still to wash your clothes. So we see from here that the shayaza includes the second, third, and fourth spray. But the time makes says this your basis. It says here min hayisoid. It says here that if it landed, if once you already poured it on your side, you don't need kibbutz. Mashma, but if you didn't pour it on your side yet, if it's ready to go to your side, you're about to pour it on your side, you didn't put it there yet, it does kibbutz. But why? Everyone agrees that only the 3 matanas, not beyond the 3 matanas. Roli said, don't kibbutz. That you don't have to spray. If you don't pour anything down the Yisoid, it doesn't matter. So following your logic, you're making a diak. Dafka wants to hit the keren, but if you're going to hit the keren, it's matami your clothing. So the same thing by your side. Only if it lands in your side, right? But if it's gonna land in your side, it should matami your clothing. But why? You don't have to. It's no longer ashiyaza. You don't have to spray anything down the side if you have nothing left. So when it answers ha mani ram nechemia, the Gemara says the author of this Mishnah regarding Yisoid is Takir Nechemia. That nan Rab Nechemia says Shili hadam sheikriven b'chutz, any leftover blood that you do outside chayiv, that you are chayiv. So he holds even the shiraim of the blood that blows in the Yisoid is still treated like blood.
Even after you finish spritzing it.
No, yeah, as long as you didn't pour it down the Yisoid yet. So if you're about to put in your Yisoid, you take it outside, you're chayiv. So according to Nechemia, that's why this Mishnah includes also the Yisoid. But forget that part. The main thing we're learning over here is that the three matanas which are rowed to go to the keren, that everyone will agree with. Where they argue with him is regarding the blood that's going down to Yisoid. How do we treat? Is that blood still for the mizbeach or not? But the three matanas that are going on the keren is going to go on the keren. Everyone agrees that is considered blood, and if it lands in your clothes, you're tummy. So we see, for me, that's how I know that these three matanas still are treated like the first matana is dam. And tomorrow we'll learn this whole Nechemia whether we agree. I don't know if it's a raya or not.
Say he it means put in the mikveh, right?
Yeah. It needs his stomach. Okay, have a good Chodesh.
Wash it in the